ESOMAR, Christine Lusk. Thank you.
Hello everyone, how's it going? Thanks for having us. Kristen, I believe you have a reading that I think will set the tone for what it is that we want to talk about, so I'll hand things over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So ESOMAR, if you're not familiar with ESOMAR, we're a global association that represents the data and insights industry, and of course polling and political polling is an important part of that. So we lobby and advocate for those professionals around the world, and we partner with another association called WAPOR, which is the World Association of Public Opinion Research. We're in the process of updating a study right now, but I wanted to just very briefly read some highlights from the last report from the executive summary, just so you have a taste of where we are with global polling at this moment. It would be wonderful to say that there's been a relaxation of restrictions on the freedom to conduct opinion polls and to publish polling results, but this isn't the case. In all of our studies, except for 1996, about half of the countries studied reported some form of embargo on the publication of pre-election polls. And while there's been some movement in some countries to ease regulations since earlier studies, even more countries, including Brazil, Chile, El Salvador, Egypt, and Singapore, have tightened restrictions and extended embargoes. I know Urfi's going to talk more about that in just a bit. Threats to global polling include government regulations, but regulation is not the only worry for researchers. For example, increased cost for quality polling are also a factor in Africa and Europe, as are declining response rates in Europe and in North America. In Latin America, there is concern about the ability to reach respondents because of crime and security concerns. And the study that we conducted shows that one thing that remains unchanged in governments is in more than half of the countries in our study, they restrict the publication of poll results before elections, with the strongest limits in Latin America.
So we're going to get on to this point of government interference very explicitly, actually, when we come to you, Urfi. But John, I'd like to start with you, because that interference from politicians drips down into our media and also on the ground in terms of voters when they work to undermine polling. And one example of that is the host of the most popular show on the internet, Joe Rogan. And he says, pollsters can only measure people who are dumb enough to answer the phone to pollsters. Why is he wrong?
Well, I mean, the growth of online research meant that we can now access people in different ways. Polling is undoubtedly difficult, particularly on telephone, to know who you're talking to and to get balanced samples. But, well, I mean, I've done a lot of work analysing the accuracy of polling. I've analysed about 30,000 in the last 60 years and sort of tracked the overall quality of results, and it's remained remarkably steady. The average poll conducted 7 days before the election, 88% are within their published margin of error. 85% of polls conducted predict the end results. That's before you start aggregating. When you aggregate polling predictions, they become even more accurate than 95%. So there's a little bit of a misnomer that polls are not accurate. They actually are remarkably accurate. We just don't hear about the ones that are not. I mean,
that's true.
Basically, once every 20 polls, you're going to get a misread. Unfortunately, it's happened twice in the last 2 US elections. A sort of black swan experience. But I mean, the last US election was particularly problematic because of actually the pressure on the leaders' attitude towards polling meant that some people simply didn't want to talk to polling companies, which, I think is a problem, a unique problem in some respects. But I think that, yes, polling is particularly difficult. It requires a lot of skill. to do properly. I mean, and good people invest an awful lot of effort in preliminarily, before they do any polling, understanding the audiences they're talking to, understanding the biases of their sample sources, and calibrating for that, understanding the fault lines in the society to understand that make sure they have balanced sample. No one probably quite realizes the work that goes into, one of the big company like YouGov, the work that they put in to ensure that they are fully representative in the samples that they reach. I would say, obviously, I'm an advocate for the polling industry, but I mean, I think that it's a lot more accurate than people would probably give credit to.
We'll get to this point of whether indeed the actual purpose of polling is just predictive accuracy. But very quickly, on that point about the 2 US elections, what is it in your view that led to the results not necessarily correlating with what polling was indicating?
Well, 2016 was, it's been well looked at. In actual fact, at a national level, the polls were remarkably accurate. So I can tell you actually the 2016 election was the most accurate US poll in history. You won't believe me that. Some of the regional polls weren't very accurate, but there was what's known as a directional error, and that all the polls were out by the same amount in the same direction. And this is something that people find struggle to get their head around, is that polls at any one point in time are just a measure of public opinion at a point in time, and we forget the fact that it moves. And even in the course of 2 or 3 days, it can move. And the way that media gets manipulated by political events, it can remove really dramatically. It can move in a couple of hours. Over a small little story. And of course, 2016, there was a big blow up of the news story around Hillary Clinton, the email, and that's one a bit of movement. The last election, I think it boils down to the fact that Trump alienated a group of voters from talking to polling companies, and they were invisible to pollsters. It was around about 4%, which made it extremely difficult to then account for what they were going to do. And that is an incredibly unique situation. Christian?
Well, I think, to back up John's point about the accuracy of polling, and particularly, I think some of the negative feedback that the polling industry got around the 2016 election when Donald Trump in the US was elected, 10 of 11 of the Real Clear Politics polls predicted the outcome accurately. We also have the Electoral College that we have to deal with in the US, and there were definitely some outliers within that system. And so I think to say that polling is inaccurate or that there are issues with it, I think is an exaggeration for sure.
So, Erpi, you have direct experience of government interference with your work. Tell us what your experience is.
Yes, in LATAM in general, there are so many problems in 2 ways. One is the restrictions for just doing polling, and the other the embargo for publishing results for elections. And in both ways, there are discussions all over the region trying to increase all these restrictions. For example, in the year 2010, we had in Peru, the government wanted us to submit the database, the full database of answers with the respondent's ID, violating all our codes of ethics and how we were working. So at that time, I was president of the Peruvian Association of Market Research, and we decided to stop publishing results of all polls. And with the help of the media, of course, we made a lot of pressure and succeeded, and the government had to withdraw that law. So, but that's a continuous fight. Last year, the same happened in Colombia. Before we had that in Uruguay, and it's the same. Governments sometimes try, to kill the messenger, but they don't like the message, they don't like the results. So let's kill the messenger instead of, embracing the results and trying to improve things, or even ask themselves what can we do to get more support or to gain more popularity.
So just to really spell things out, a former Peruvian president actually went to the media and accused your organization, of trying to extort him, saying, give us some money and we'll improve your position in the polls. That happened, right?
Yes, that happened to us. And at that time our polls were giving him 5%.
And what did he get in the end?
5%.
Tells it all, really, doesn't it? In this point as well, specifically in Peru, talking about blocking polling coming out, that provides a vacuum. There's a void there, isn't there? And often that void can be filled with disinformation.
Yes, in the region, in Peru, the embargo date is 7 days. But if we see the region, there are countries that have 15 days embargo, for example, in Chile, Bolivia, and the average in the region in general is 7 days. So that's a lot, especially considering that people usually decide their vote the last week before the elections, or even the same day of the election. So a lot of things happen that way, and we are not reporting that. And I think polls are the same as advertisement or any other piece of information that the public can get to get informed before the election day. So what is going on with this embargo date is that a lot of fake polls are coming out. Last elections in Peru, we found just for my company 48 different fake results in the last week. And we're not the only ones doing polls. So you can imagine the huge amount of fake news, fake polls that come up because of these embargoes in the region.
Kristen, is it usually a political motivation for impeding or undermining polls? In your experience, that's usually what motivates it?
Well, I mean, I think that the motivation is that there are governments or businesses, depending on who benefits from a certain candidate being elected, that don't really want the actual sentiment of the population to come out. And so I think that's a lot of the motivation. I wouldn't say it's just government. I think it's big business as well. Particularly in the U.S., there's massive lobbying for certain candidates, an incredible amount of money that goes into our election system around certain candidates. And they'll pay lots of money to get their person elected because it benefits their business in really meaningful ways.
In your experience as well, are these problems uniform around the world? Or in terms of different locations, are the problems different?
In my experience, and it'd be great to hear from Murphy and John as well, they're different by region. And I think that's the powerful thing about ESOMAR is that we are a global association. And because of that, we're able to look at what's going on in one region, like Latin America, and then, make sure that, that around the world that polling is being held to the same standards and that we're able to defend polling globally and not just in one region or one country, because there are differences.
So, John, then, in the case of the UK, there are efforts we've already discussed, government interference, political interference, and also methodological errors as well. But the UK also has a changing dynamic of politics, doesn't it?
Yes.
That informs that.
Well, the whole world has got a changing dynamic. I think that polling in an era of sort of left-right politics was fairly well established for many years, and the way that polling companies work was to make sure they have representative groups from one side of the argument and the other, and they poll. But now, I think society's changing away from, workers and bosses and unions and so on. And there's a lot of disaggregated, small-scale business people essentially running their own lives, who were once possibly traditionally left-wing voting individuals. They're now running their own, a plumber might be running his own business, and they have a different viewpoint on the world. And that changing shape of society makes it very difficult to pin down how those people are actually going to vote, and it's difficult to quota for them. And they're sparked by different motivations. And the rise of populism is a phenomenon around the world. It's individuals tapping into that group, that new group of people who've got their own interests, and talking to them in a different language that traditional, left-right divides don't account for, which then makes it very difficult to. I mean, obviously, 2016 US election was suffered the same challenge. A whole load of what were traditionally low-educated voters who wouldn't normally vote were motivated to vote for the first time, and that changed the dynamic of who you're making sure you're reaching people in less educated rural communities who are, who had a voice.
Invisible voters.
Yeah.
This also comes back, doesn't it, to sort of where we started about the purpose of polling, whether it is accurate prediction or to reflect public opinion, and how you do that in the context of invisible voters or movements like that. It's a very difficult challenge you're facing.
Yes. I mean, I think my criticism is that I think that polling's turned into a game. Yeah, a bit. I think people like Nate Silver was tremendously successful at predicting results of the 2012 election, and people became enthusiastic about trying to create a model to try and predict the results of elections, and the predicting results seemed to be the be-all and end-all and purpose of gathering all that information, whereas actually the role of courting public opinion, finding out what they think, is tremendously richer and more important than just trying to work out the result of election. The role of polling has all sorts of sincere and useful aspects for democracy, particularly in the world of social media, where there's so much misinformation running around. You don't know where people are going. It's easy to get misinformed about what the public think just by looking at a Twitter feed. And so, courting a well-conducted, well-balanced piece of market research is really the only way to properly understand what's going on in society and in a point in time before the run-up of an election is when it's most looked at. But it has rolled throughout the whole of the cycle of politics to hold people accountable. And without it, you end up with governments essentially gaslighting the public about what they think.
It's very, very strong words. I mean, what's your view of what John's just said there? Do you agree with him?
Totally agree. What happens is that usually politicians and even a society in general focus only on the results and to be how accurate and how they predict, but they don't see the trends and the value of how does it work for shaping the future, how does this contribute, not only for the elections, because elections is just one part of polling. It's a small part of all the polling thing. This morning, for example, there was a masterclass related to women and empowerment and how minorities are also seen in society and how governments can work politics and social policy to improve the society in general, to build a better tomorrow for all of us.
Kristen, you kick things off for us, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to close them off for us. State the case for polling. Why is it so fundamentally important to our societies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that polling is designed to measure the public sentiment. It's not meant to sway or persuade. It's meant to, to Urfi's point, to provide a baseline for what a particular population is thinking or feeling, or what is changing in terms of their values or priorities. It's not meant to sway people one way or another. And so I think the importance of it is that it isn't motivated by a particular government or a brand or a business, that it's truly objective.
Thank you guys for your contributions. I found your insights absolutely fascinating. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking John, Kristen, and Anthony. Thanks very much.